It would be so much better if you just did not exist. The words slipped effortlessly from the mouth of my own daughter-in-law, Harper, right in front of everyone. In front of my son, in front of her sister, in front of the guests who had gathered for this family dinner. The dining room froze completely. No one moved. No one breathed. I felt as if my entire body had turned to stone, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. 65 years of life stared back at me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to cry, to beg, to apologize for taking up space. But I did not. I rose from my chair slowly, my back straight, looking her directly in the eyes. "Consider me gone." "Then," I said with a voice I hardly recognized as my own, "go ahead and live your lives as if your mother-in-law never existed." The silence grew heavier, denser. And then I did something I had never done in that entire house. I smiled. It was a calm, serene, almost sweet smile. For the first time all night, I smiled. I watched Harper's face shift from satisfaction to confusion. Madison stopped recording with her phone for a second. Liam stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped backward. "Mom." His voice sounded broken, terrified. "What did you just do?" But I did not answer him. I did not say another word. I simply raised my right hand and pointed toward the dining room window, the large picture window that looked out onto the street. Everyone turned at the same time, and when they saw who was standing outside, the expression on their faces changed completely. Harper opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Madison went pale instantly. Liam looked at me with a mixture of terror and confusion that I had never seen in his eyes before, because outside stood someone they never expected to see. Someone whose mere presence meant that everything they thought they knew about me was a lie. But before I tell you who was out there, you need to understand how I arrived at this moment. You need to feel what I felt. You need to witness every humiliation I endured in silence. The nightmare had begun 6 hours earlier. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when I arrived at Liam and Harper's house. It was a massive 2-story colonial in one of the best suburbs of Chicago, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a stone fountain in the driveway. I lived on the other side of the city, in a cramped studio apartment where my bed and a small table barely fit. I had taken 2 city buses to get here, clutching a tote bag filled with the only thing I could offer, homemade chocolate chip cookies I had baked that morning. I walked up the flagstone path to the front door and rang the doorbell. I waited. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 3. Finally, the door swung open, and there was Harper, wearing a coral dress that hit just at the knee and heels, so high my feet ached just looking at them. Her black hair was pulled back in an elaborate updo. She wore a pearl necklace that caught the late afternoon light. She looked me up and down with those dark eyes full of disdain. "Eleanor," she said my name, as if it burned her tongue. "You are early." It was not true. She had told me to arrive at 5, but contradicting her would only make things worse. "I am sorry," I murmured, holding up the bag with my cookies. "I brought something to share." Harper looked at the bag as if it contained toxic waste. "Oh, you should not have bothered. You know we have a caterer for these events." "A caterer?" "For a simple family dinner." She took the bag from my hands with 2 fingers, as if she did not want to actually touch it, and dropped it onto a console table in the foyer. "Well, come in. But take off your shoes. We just had the hardwood floors refinished." I slipped off my worn-out loafers while she watched me with that smile I had learned to hate. My socks had a small hole in the heel that I tried to hide. "Liam is in his home office," Harper said as she walked down the hall, her heels clicking against the marble. "Do not bother him. He is on an important call. Madison will be here any minute." I followed her in my socks, feeling the cold floor beneath my feet. The house smelled of expensive perfume and scented candles. Everything was spotless, as if no one actually lived there. Modern art hung on the walls, and designer furniture filled every space. In the dining room, the table was already set with china plates, crystal glasses, and silverware. I counted 6 settings, 6 people for dinner. "Sit over there." Harper pointed to a chair at the corner of the table, the furthest from the head. "And please, do not touch anything. The plates are imported." I sat in silence, hands in my lap. I was wearing my best blouse, a beige one I had washed and ironed that morning. My black trousers were a little shiny at the knees, but they were the only presentable thing I owned. I had pulled my gray hair back into a simple ponytail. I did not have the money for salons or hair dye. Harper disappeared into the kitchen, and I was left alone in that enormous dining room, feeling smaller than ever. I looked at the photographs hanging on the wall. Liam and Harper in the Hamptons. Liam and Harper in Paris. Liam and Harper at their wedding. There was not a single photograph of me. It was as if I did not exist in my own son's life. The doorbell rang, and I heard voices in the entryway. Madison had arrived. Her shrill laugh filled the house as Harper greeted her with hugs and air kisses. "Sister, you look spectacular," I heard Harper say. "That silver dress is gorgeous." They appeared in the dining room together, linked arm in arm like two queens. Madison saw me, and her smile widened. "Oh, Mrs. Eleanor," she said with fake sweetness. "What a surprise to see you here. I thought these dinners were just for close family." I felt the sting of her words, but I said nothing. Harper laughed. "Madison, do not be mean. Eleanor is family. Even if she lives so far away, we almost never see her." They sat together on the other side of the table and began talking to each other, completely ignoring me. They talked about boutiques I could never visit, about restaurants where one meal cost more than what I earned in a week. Liam finally appeared half an hour later. My son, my only son, walked into the dining room with his phone in his hand, checking emails. He was 38 years old, but he looked tired, with deep circles under his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said without really looking at me. "How have you been?" Before I could answer, Harper interrupted him. "Honey, come taste this Cabernet I bought. It was $300 a bottle." And so began the dinner that would end up changing everything. The other guests arrived shortly after. Two couples who were friends of Harper and Madison, people I had never seen before but who clearly belonged to the same world of luxury and appearances. They entered the dining room laughing, carrying shopping bags from expensive department stores and talking about a trip they were planning to Europe. Harper greeted them with effusive hugs, while I remained seated in my corner, invisible. No one introduced me. No one said hello. It was as if my chair were empty. "Well, let's all sit down," Harper announced in a sing-song voice. "Dinner is served." A team of servers appeared from the kitchen, dressed in crisp black uniforms, carrying trays of food that looked more expensive than everything I ate in a month. They placed the plates in front of each guest with precise movements. When they got to me, one of the servers hesitated. He looked at Harper as if waiting for instructions. "Give her a small portion," Harper said, without looking at me. "Eleanor has to watch her health at her age. You know, she cannot eat much." The laughter was discreet, but I heard it all. Madison covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes dancing with amusement. My plate arrived with exactly half the food the others had. A tiny piece of steak, 3 small potatoes, a spoonful of vegetables. I felt the heat of humiliation rising up my neck, but I lowered my gaze and said nothing. "So, Eleanor," one of the guests addressed me suddenly. She was a woman in her 40s, with mahogany-dyed hair and raspberry-colored lips. "What do you do for a living?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Harper cut me off. "Oh, Eleanor works at a discount store. She folds t-shirts and organizes racks. It is very noble work." The way she said noble made it sound like an insult. After all, not everyone can have successful careers like my Liam. Liam said nothing. He kept eating in silence, never lifting his eyes from his plate. My son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died when he was barely 5. The boy for whom I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to pay for his private school, his university, his books. The boy who now could not even look me in the eye while his wife tore me apart in front of strangers. "How admirable," said another guest, though her tone made it clear she admired nothing. "And how long have you worked there, Eleanor?" I swallowed hard. 3 years, I replied quietly. Madison let out a laugh. 3 years folding other people's clothes. How interesting. I could not do it. I would die of boredom. Harper gave her a playful tap on the arm. "Madison, do not be cruel. Everyone does what they can with what they have." Every word was a stake driven deeper. I looked at Liam desperately, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to remember who had given him everything so he could be sitting at that table. But he just took his glass of wine and drank deeply, avoiding my gaze. "And tell me, Mrs. Eleanor," continued the woman with the mahogany hair, "where do you live? Somewhere quiet, right?" Before I could answer, Madison jumped in. She lives in an apartment on the south side of the city. A really old building. Right, Eleanor? I went once and almost had a panic attack. The stairs creak. There is no elevator, and it smells like mildew. The laughter was louder this time. I felt the walls of the dining room closing in on me. Harper poured more wine into the guests' glasses. Poor mother-in-law. I always tell Liam we should help her more, but she is so proud. She will not accept money. She looked up at me with those eyes full of malice. Right, Eleanor? You prefer to live in poverty rather than accept help from your own son? That was a lie. A cruel lie. I had never rejected help. They had never offered it. The only dollars Liam had given me in the last 2 years were $50 for my birthday, and Harper had made it feel as if she were gifting me a fortune. Be grateful, Eleanor, she had told me in front of him. Not all children are so generous with their mothers. One of the guests, a man in a gray suit, wiped his mouth with his napkin. Well, at least she has her health. That is the important thing at that age, isn't it? Health and a roof, even if it is humble. I nodded mechanically, feeling the tears beginning to pool behind my eyes. I could not cry here. I would not give them that satisfaction. Speaking of health, Madison leaned forward with a venomous smile. Harper told me that lately you have been forgetting things, Eleanor. That sometimes you do not remember where you left your keys. That you confuse the days of the week. I froze. That was not true either. I do not. I tried to defend myself, but Harper cut me off again. It is normal at her age. 75 is old. The brain starts to fail. I felt like I was running out of air. I am 65, I said with a trembling voice. Harper blinked as if she had made an innocent mistake. Oh, sorry, 65. I forget because you look so much older. The laughter exploded around the table. It was open laughter, undisguised, cruel. Madison slapped her thigh, laughing. The guests exchanged amused glances. And Liam, my son, my only son, smiled. Just a little, just for a second, but he smiled. Something inside me broke in that moment. It was not a loud break. It was silent but definitive. Like a branch finally snapping after bearing too much weight for too long. I looked at my plate with the half-eaten food and asked myself how I had arrived here, how I had allowed them to treat me like this, how I had let my own blood humiliate me without saying a word. Well, Harper stood up and raised her glass. I want to propose a toast. Everyone raised their glasses except me. I did not have wine. They had not even served me. I toast to family, Harper said, looking directly at me. To the people who really matter. To those who contribute something valuable to our lives. She paused, and her smile grew darker. And I also toast because soon we will make some important changes in this family. Changes that will bring us more peace, more tranquility. Madison nodded enthusiastically. It is for the best, sister. It was about time. I did not understand what they were talking about, but the tone of their voices made my skin crawl. Liam lowered his gaze again, uncomfortable. Harper, maybe this isn't the moment, he muttered. Of course it is the moment, she replied firmly. Everyone here is a trusted friend. They can know the truth. She turned to me with that expression of fake concern she had perfected. You see, Eleanor, Liam and I have been talking about your situation, and, frankly, it worries us a lot that you live alone in that horrible apartment. At your age, with your health deteriorating, you could have an accident and no one would know for days. My heart began to beat faster. My health is fine, I said, but my voice sounded too weak. That is why, Harper continued without listening to me, we have been looking into some places. Assisted living facilities. Places where you would be cared for, fed, watched, where you would not be a burden to anyone. The word burden echoed in the silence that followed. The guests watched us with interest, as if they were watching a play. A nursing home, I said slowly, feeling the reality of her words hitting me. You want to put me in a nursing home. Do not call it that. It sounds so ugly. Madison wrinkled her nose with disgust. They are luxury residences, Eleanor. Places where people of your age can be with others like you. Imagine. You would not have to worry about paying rent, cooking, nothing. All inclusive. Her voice was sweet like poisoned honey. Of course, they are not cheap. They cost around $6,000 a month, but Liam and Harper are willing to make that sacrifice for you. I looked at my son with a mixture of disbelief and pain that split my chest. Liam, is this true? He finally looked up, but he could not hold my gaze for more than 2 seconds. Mom, it is just an option we are considering. For your well-being. His voice sounded hollow, as if he were repeating words someone else had put in his mouth. My well-being, I repeated slowly. My well-being is to be locked up in a place with strangers while you live here in this mansion. Harper set her glass down on the table with a sharp click. Do not be dramatic, Eleanor. We are not locking you up anywhere. We are offering you a solution, because let's be honest. Your current life is depressing. You live in squalor. You work at a job that barely feeds you. You have no friends, no social life. What future awaits you there? The words hit me like punches. Each one was true, but spoken in a way that made me feel less than human. I did not ask. I tried to say, but the woman with mahogany hair interrupted me. Oh, poor thing. It must be difficult to accept that one can no longer fend for oneself. The others nodded with fake compassion, looking at me as if I were a wounded animal that had to be put down for its own good. Madison served herself more food from the center of the table, grabbing the biggest portions shamelessly. Besides, Eleanor, let's be realistic. How much longer do you think you are going to be able to keep working? You are 65. Your knees must be destroyed from standing all day. Your hands must hurt. What are you going to do when you can no longer work? Live on the street? I have savings, I lied. I had nothing. Every cent I earned went to rent, food, and the buses I took to visit my son once a month. Harper let out a dry laugh. Savings? Please. Eleanor, everyone knows you live paycheck to paycheck. You have nothing. She leaned forward, her eyes shining with cruelty. And that is exactly the reason why you need us to make decisions for you. Because clearly, you do not know how to manage your life. I felt my throat closing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell them that I had managed my life perfectly well when I raised Liam alone. When I worked until exhaustion so he would have everything he needed, when I sold the few valuable things I had to pay for his tuition. But the words did not come out. I sat there, hands trembling in my lap, feeling smaller than ever. One of the guests, the man in the gray suit, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, maybe this is a family matter that should be discussed in private. Harper waved her hand, dismissing the importance. No, everyone here is practically family. Besides, we already made the decision. We are just waiting for the right moment to make the transition. The transition. The words came out of my mouth like a broken whisper. We already visited 3 facilities, Harper continued as if she were talking about the weather. There is a particularly nice one about 2 hours from here. It has gardens, recreational activities, nurses 24/7. Of course, it is far, but it is what we can afford. Visiting you would be complicated, maybe once every 2 or 3 months, but you would be well cared for. 2 or 3 months. They wanted to get rid of me, hide me where no one could see me, where I would not be an embarrassing reminder that Liam came from poverty. I looked around the table and saw everyone's faces looking at me with pity, mixed with discomfort. I was the evening's entertainment, the main course, the old mother-in-law being dispatched like useless trash. Liam, my voice cracked. Are you really going to allow this? My son finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes destroyed me. There was no love there. There was no gratitude for everything I had sacrificed for him. There was only resignation, and worse still, shame. Shame of me, of where we came from, of what I represented. Mom, try to understand, he began to say, but Harper cut him off. Liam and I have plans for our future. We want to travel. We want to expand our business. We want to live without constant worries. And, frankly, you are a constant worry. She paused, took a sip of wine, and then said the words that would change everything. It would be so much easier for everyone if you simply accepted reality. Madison nodded enthusiastically. It is true, Eleanor. Sometimes you have to accept that you are a burden, that the best gift you can give your son is to stop complicating his life. She laughed as she said this, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The other people at the table exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable now, but no one said anything to defend me. A burden. I repeated the words slowly, letting them settle in my chest like stones. I am a burden. Harper sighed, as if she were being extremely patient with a difficult child. Do not take it personally, Eleanor. It is just the truth. Look at the reality. You have no money. You have no property. You have nothing to contribute to this family. Your only function was to be a mother. And you already fulfilled that function. Liam is a grown man now, successful, with his own life. He does not need you anymore. The tears finally began to roll down my cheeks. I could not stop them. 33 years. 33 years raising my son alone, sacrificing every dream, every desire, every opportunity to ensure he had a better life than mine. And now they were telling me he did not need me anymore, that I was disposable. Oh, do not cry, Madison said in a sing-song voice. You are going to ruin your makeup, although, well, you are not wearing makeup, are you? More laughter. Always more laughter. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, feeling the humiliation burn on my cheeks. The guests were now looking at their plates, clearly uncomfortable, but doing nothing to stop this. Harper stood up and began to walk around the table like a predator circling her prey. You know what the worst part is, Eleanor? You came here tonight expecting what, exactly? Expecting us to treat you as if you were important? You, with your second-hand clothes and your miserable life. She stopped right behind my chair, and I felt her breath near my ear. The truth is, you were never good enough for this family. You never will be. My heart beat so hard I thought everyone could hear it. My hands shook uncontrollably. I looked at the fork next to my plate and for a second imagined grabbing it and defending myself, screaming, fighting. But I was so tired, so deeply exhausted from fighting against a world that had decided I was worth nothing. Harper returned to her spot and raised her glass again. In fact, she said with a blood-chilling smile, let me rephrase my earlier toast. She looked directly into my eyes with a hatred so pure it left me breathless. I toast because this family would be much better, much happier, much more successful. She paused deliberately, letting the silence thicken. If you simply did not exist. The dining room went completely silent. You couldn't even hear anyone breathing. Madison had her phone raised, recording my reaction with a satisfied smile. The guests looked between Harper and me, waiting to see how I would crumble. Liam had his head down, a coward to the end. And then, something inside me shifted. It was not rage I felt. It was not pain. It was clarity. A clarity so bright and cold it pierced through me like a ray of light cutting through darkness. For 65 years I had lived trying to be enough for everyone. Enough for my husband before he died. Enough for my son. Enough for a world that constantly told me I wasn't. And in that moment, sitting at that table surrounded by cruel people, I finally understood something fundamental. I had never been the problem. They were. I rose from my chair slowly. Every muscle in my body moved with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Harper stopped smiling. Madison lowered her phone slightly, confused. Liam looked up with wide eyes. Everyone expected me to cry more, to beg, to shrink until I disappeared. But I had already made my decision. You are right, Harper, I said with a clear, firm voice. The silence in the dining room deepened. This family would be better without me. In fact, consider that I no longer exist to you. I walked slowly toward the center of the dining room, looking at every person present. Live your lives as if your mother-in-law, as if your mother never existed, as if these last 65 years of my life meant absolutely nothing. I saw the confusion spreading across their faces. This was not what they expected. I wasn't begging. I wasn't crying. I was declaring my freedom. And then I did something I had never done in that house. I smiled. A genuine, quiet, almost happy smile. For the first time in that horrible night, I smiled. Harper stood up abruptly. What are you talking about, Eleanor? What does that mean? Her voice had a touch of panic that hadn't been there before. Madison looked nervous now, too, looking at her sister for direction. But it was Liam who spoke, standing up from his chair so fast he almost knocked it over. Mom. His voice sounded broken, terrified. What did you do? I didn't answer him. He didn't deserve my answer. Instead, I raised my right hand and pointed toward the dining room window, that large window facing the main street, Everyone followed my hand with their gaze, turning their heads at the same time. And when they saw who was standing outside, under the yellow light of the street lamp, the color drained from all their faces. It was Arthur, my father Richard's lawyer, a tall man of about 50, with gray hair perfectly combed back, an impeccable black suit, and a leather briefcase in his hand. But it wasn't just his presence that caused the panic. It was what he represented. Because Arthur wasn't just any lawyer. He was the personal attorney for one of the richest businessmen in the city. For my father. Harper brought a hand to her mouth. "Who is that?" she asked with a trembling voice, though by her reaction, I knew she sensed something was very wrong. Madison had gone completely pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The guests looked at each other, confused, but feeling the tension filling the room like toxic gas. Liam looked at me with eyes full of fear. "Mom, what is going on? Who is that man?" His voice cracked on the last word. Finally, after years of not defending me, of letting them humiliate me, of being ashamed of me, my son was scared. And he had reason to be. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I walked toward the front door with steady steps. I heard chairs scraping behind me, everyone getting up to follow. Harper was shouting something, but I didn't listen to her words anymore. They didn't matter. I opened the door, and there was Arthur, waiting with the patience that always characterized him. "Mrs. Eleanor." He greeted me with a slight bow. "I apologize for the delay. The traffic was impossible." His voice was professional, respectful, completely different from the tone I had endured for hours. He handed me the briefcase. "I brought all the documents you requested. Everything is in order." Behind me, I heard a collective gasp. I took the briefcase with steady hands and turned to face my family and their guests. Everyone was huddled in the entryway, looking at me as if I had grown a second head. Harper's eyes were so wide they looked about to pop out of their sockets. Madison clung to her sister's arm. Liam was white as a sheet. "Eleanor." Harper tried to regain her composure. "What is this? Who is this man?" Her voice tried to sound authoritative, but it came out shaking. I opened the briefcase slowly, letting the suspense stretch. Inside were documents, photographs, folders organized with tabs, the work of months of investigation. "This is Arthur," I said calmly. "The attorney for my father, Richard Sterling." I saw Harper's eyes widen even more upon hearing that last name. Even the guests reacted. Sterling. Everyone in the city knew that name. Real estate, companies, investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "Your father," Harper repeated slowly. "Your father is. Richard Sterling is your father." She laughed, but it was a nervous, hysterical laugh. "That is impossible. You live in squalor. If your father were Richard Sterling, you would not be working in a store folding clothes." I smiled again, and this time the smile had a cutting edge. "My father and I did not speak for 30 years, I explained with a quiet voice. "We had differences when my husband died. He wanted me to move back in with him, to accept his money, to let him raise Liam with his wealth. I rejected everything. I wanted to raise my son on my own terms, to teach him the value of work, of humility." I paused, looking directly at Liam. "It seems I failed in that last part." Arthur cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Mr. Richard Sterling passed away 3 months ago," he announced in a formal voice. "He left a very specific will. Mrs. Eleanor is the sole heir to his entire fortune." He pulled a document from the briefcase. Real estate valued at $85 million, stock investments of $32 million, 3 operating companies, and cash in bank accounts totaling $18 million. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. $135 million. That was the sum of the inheritance they had just mentioned. Madison swayed and had to lean against the wall. Harper opened and closed her mouth several times without making a sound. The guests were frozen in shock. But it was Liam who finally spoke. "Mom," he whispered, "why did you never say anything?" His voice was loaded with disbelief and something else, something I took a moment to recognize: greed. I saw his eyes move toward the briefcase, calculating, thinking about what that fortune meant for him. "Why did I never say anything?" I repeated his words slowly. "Because I didn't know until 3 months ago." "Liam, why did your grandfather and I not speak? Do you remember?" Because I decided to live with pride and dignity instead of begging for money I didn't earn. I held his gaze, and because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer you. Now he understood. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him like a hammer. He had failed the test. For years, while I lived in that small apartment, while I worked myself to exhaustion, while I came to these dinners to be humiliated, he had remained silent. He had allowed his wife to treat me like trash. He had been planning to lock me in a nursing home. And all that time, I had possessed the means to live like a queen. Harper finally found her voice. "Wait, wait, wait," she stammered, approaching me with hands outstretched. "Eleanor, we didn't know. If we had known your father was Richard Sterling, obviously we would have treated you differently. This is just a terrible misunderstanding." I looked at her with disgust. "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "Calling someone a burden is a misunderstanding? Saying it would be better if I didn't exist is a misunderstanding?" I pulled another document from the briefcase. But here's the interesting part. My father didn't just leave me his fortune. He also left this. It was a thick folder. I opened it and began taking out photographs. Photographs of Harper and Madison entering nursing homes. Photographs of them speaking with administrators. Photographs of signed documents reserving a spot for me, all dated from 2 months ago. "My father watched me for all these years, even though we didn't speak," I explained. "He hired private investigators to make sure I was okay, and those investigators documented everything. Every humiliation, every insult, every plan you hatched behind my back. I pulled out more photos, scattering them on the console table like playing cards. There were dozens. Harper in meetings with facility directors, Madison signing papers as a witness, recorded conversations where they discussed how to convince me to go voluntarily, or if I resisted, how to declare me mentally incompetent." Harper backed away as if the photographs were venomous snakes. That isn't what it looks like. We were just looking for options for your care, because we care about you." Her voice was cracking as she spoke, the mask of confidence completely destroyed. Madison remained quiet, her eyes darting between her sister and the exit, clearly considering fleeing. "You cared about me?" I asked with an icy calm. "Is that why you chose the cheapest facility you found? 2 hours away where reviews speak of negligence and abuse?" I pulled out printed papers from the internet, reviews from families complaining about the place. $150 a month, that is what it was going to cost you. Not the $6,000 you mentioned tonight. 150. Liam walked over unsteadily, reading the papers over my shoulder. I saw his face transform from shock to horror. "Harper," he said with a trembling voice, "you told me the residences cost $6,000 a month. You showed me brochures for nice places, with gardens and activities." She looked at him with panic in her eyes but said nothing. He understood. "You were going to keep the difference. You were going to put her in a horrible place and pocket $5,800 every month." Harper tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. "Liam, my love, you have to understand. That money was going to be for us, for our future, for the trips we want to take, for the bigger house we want to buy. Your mother wasn't going to notice anyway. She doesn't know about luxury or—" The slap from Liam echoed through the foyer like a thunderclap. It was so unexpected we all took a step back. Harper brought her hand to her cheek, looking at him in disbelief. I had never seen her speechless before. "Shut up," Liam said with a voice shaking with rage. "Don't say another word." He turned to me with tears rolling down his cheeks. "Mom, I didn't know. You have to believe me. Harper told me it was the best thing for you, that in those places you would have better medical care, that you would be safer." I thought. He broke down, covering his face with his hands. "My God, what have I done?" I wanted to feel compassion for him. I wanted to believe he really didn't know. But Arthur pulled another folder from the briefcase before I could respond. "There is more," he said professionally. "Much more." This folder was even thicker than the last. It contained bank statements, credit card records, additional photographs. "Mr. Sterling also investigated your family's finances, Mrs. Eleanor. He believed it was important you knew exactly what kind of people you were dealing with." He opened the folder and began to read. "Harper Duran has gambling debts of $82,000. She has been betting online for the last 2 years, using credit cards in her husband's name without his knowledge." Liam went even paler. Madison has received bank transfers from her sister totaling $35,000 in the last 18 months, all coming from the marriage's joint accounts. The words fell like bombs. Each revelation was worse than the last. Furthermore, Arthur continued, there is evidence that both sisters planned, once you were committed to the facility, to petition for legal power over your financial affairs, claiming senile dementia. They had prepared medical documents falsified by a doctor who turned out to be a friend of the family. Madison finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. You cannot prove any of that. These are baseless accusations. But her voice shook so much her words lacked conviction. Arthur simply smiled. A small, professional gesture that was somehow terrifying. I have recordings, he said simply. Phone conversations between you and your sister explicitly discussing the plan. Conversations where you refer to Mrs. Eleanor as the stupid old woman and the obstacle. Conversations where you calculate how much money you could get if you managed to declare her incompetent and sell her alleged properties. He pressed play on a small digital recorder. Harper's voice filled the foyer, clear and unmistakable. Once we have her locked up, we wait 6 months and then file the papers. Dr. Mendez already agreed to sign the dementia documents for $5,000. After that, everything the old hag has will legally be Liam's, and therefore mine. Madison's laugh followed. You are a genius, sister. That poor idiot will never know what hit her. The silence after the recording was sepulchral. The guests looked at Harper and Madison with horror and disgust. Liam was completely shattered, looking at his wife as if he had never really seen her before. And she, Harper, the woman who an hour ago had been sitting on her throne of arrogance, was now trembling like a leaf. But the most interesting part, I said, claiming everyone's attention, is that you thought I had nothing. All this elaborate plan, all this effort, to keep my miserable apartment and my non-existent savings. I laughed, a genuine laugh that bubbled up from deep inside me. You spent money on private investigators trying to find my supposed properties. You bribed a doctor. You planned for months, and all for nothing. Harper fell to her knees. She literally collapsed onto the foyer floor, sobbing. Please, Eleanor, please, forgive me. I don't know what I was thinking. The stress, the debts. I am not really like this. Please, give this family another chance. She reached her hands out to me, pleading. Madison also began to cry, but she stayed standing, dignity barely holding her body up. I looked at that woman kneeling in front of me, the same one who an hour ago had told me it would be better if I didn't exist. I felt something I had never experienced toward another person before. It wasn't hate. It was absolute indifference, as if I were looking at a stranger who meant nothing to me. No, I said simply. I turned to Arthur. The other documents are ready? He nodded and pulled out another set of papers. These are legal documents to press charges for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted financial abuse of an elderly person. I also have here a temporary restraining order that can become permanent if you wish. Liam stepped forward, hands outstretched. Mom, please, don't do this. I know Harper made terrible mistakes, but I am your son, your only son. You cannot destroy your own family over this. His voice was loaded with desperation. I promise I will divorce her right now if that is what you want. I will kick Harper out of the house this very night. But please, don't push me away. Don't ruin my life. There it was. The truth finally revealed. He wasn't worried about losing me. He was worried about losing access to my new fortune. He was worried the $135 million would disappear from his reach. Even now, even knowing everything, his first thought was about the money. Ruin your life. I repeated his words slowly. Liam, I gave you life. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously so you would have food, clothes, education. I sold the jewelry my mother left me to pay for your college. I rejected marriage proposals because no man wanted to take on a child that wasn't his. I sacrificed everything, absolutely everything, so you would have opportunities. I walked up to him until I was inches from his face. And you paid me back by letting your wife humiliate me for years. You remained silent while they planned to lock me in a horrible nursing home. You watched me cry tonight, and the only thing you did was look down. Tears were running down my face now, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. So do not talk to me about ruining lives, Liam. Because the only ruined life here is mine. 33 years wasted raising someone who turned out to be exactly what I swore he would never be. A coward with no principles. I saw my words hit him like physical blows. He staggered back, looking for support against the wall. But I wasn't finished. However, I continued, my voice becoming colder, more controlled. Your grandfather Richard included a special clause in his will. Arthur pulled out the main document, the official will. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of the paper and everything it represented. He knew what you were like. Even without speaking to me for 30 years, he hired investigators who reported not only on me, but also on you, on the man you had become. I opened the will to the marked page and began to read aloud. It says here, to my grandson Liam Duran Sterling, I leave the sum of $10 million under the following conditions. He must divorce Harper Duran immediately. He must cut all contact with her family. He must move into a modest apartment for a minimum period of 2 years to learn the value of work and humility. He must work a minimum wage job for at least 1 year. And he must demonstrate respect, care, and genuine love toward his mother, my daughter Eleanor. Liam's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: hope, horror, indignation, desperation. If he fulfills all these conditions for 2 consecutive years, I continued reading, he will receive the $10 million. If he fails to fulfill even a single condition, or if at any moment he shows disrespect toward Eleanor, he loses all right to the inheritance, and the money will be donated to charities supporting low-income single mothers. Harper screamed from the floor where she was still kneeling. This is insanity. You cannot force him to divorce me. We are legally married. Her voice was hysterical now, all pretense of dignity abandoned. Liam, you cannot do this. We have been married 5 years. You love me. Liam looked at her with an expression that mixed contempt and something darker. Love you? He asked with a hollow voice. Harper, you just heard my grandfather left me $10 million if I divorce you. Do you really think there is any possibility I won't do it? He turned to me with pleading eyes. Mom, I will do everything the will says. I will divorce her tomorrow. I will cut contact with her family. I will work wherever necessary. Just give me a chance to show you I can change. But I knew my son. I knew the greed in his eyes. This wasn't genuine repentance. It was calculation. He was willing to spend 2 years being humble, being poor, being respectful, because at the end there were $10 million waiting for him. It was a performance. A role he was willing to play because the prize was worth it. There is more, Arthur said, interrupting before I could answer. Mr. Sterling also included stipulations on how Mrs. Eleanor can use her inheritance. Specifically, he left instructions that she can, at her discretion, modify or completely annul Liam's inheritance if at any moment she feels his repentance is not genuine. He looked at me with respect. Basically, Mrs. Eleanor, you have absolute control. You can give your son the chance he asks for, or you can cut him off completely. The decision is entirely yours. The power of those words ran through me like electricity. For the first time in my life, I had control. Not Liam, not Harper, not the world that had constantly pushed me down. I looked at my son, really looked at him, trying to find even a flicker of the boy I had loved with every fiber of my being. The boy who used to hug me and tell me that when he grew up he would buy me a big house and I would never have to work again. But that boy had died. Or maybe he never really existed. Maybe he had always been this person in front of me, someone capable of looking the other way while his mother was destroyed, as long as it was convenient for him. I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Time to process all of this. I turned to Harper, who was still on the floor like a wounded animal. But for you, there is no time or consideration. Arthur, proceed with the legal charges against Harper and Madison. I want them to face the full consequences of their actions. Madison let out a choked sob. Please, Mrs. Eleanor, I have 2 small children. If I go to prison, what is going to happen to them? It was the first time she mentioned having children. How convenient that she only remembered them now, when she faced real consequences. You should have thought of your children before planning to lock an innocent old woman in a horrible nursing home to steal her non-existent money, I replied without a shred of sympathy. You should have thought of them before laughing while your sister humiliated me, before recording my tears for your entertainment. I looked her directly in the eyes. Your children will learn a valuable lesson, that actions have consequences. Something clearly no one taught you. One of the guests, the woman with mahogany hair, finally spoke. Her voice trembled. Mrs. Eleanor, we didn't know anything about this. We just came for dinner. Please, don't think we were part of their plans. The other guests nodded vigorously, backing away from Harper and Madison as if their misfortune were contagious. I know, I told them with a softer voice. You were witnesses, nothing more. But now you are also witnesses for justice. I turned to Arthur. You will need their statements for the legal case. He nodded. It would be useful to have testimonies from people who witnessed the humiliation and heard the direct threats tonight. The guests exchanged panicked glances, but nodded. They knew they had no choice. They had been present. They had seen everything. Their testimonies would seal Harper and Madison's fate. The man in the gray suit pulled out a business card and gave it to Arthur. I will call my lawyer tomorrow to coordinate. I am willing to testify about everything I saw and heard tonight. Harper crawled toward Liam, grabbing his pant leg with desperate hands. Liam, please. You are my husband. You cannot abandon me like this. Tell them this is a mistake. That I love you. That I did it all thinking of us. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in black streaks. The coral dress was wrinkled and stained. She looked destroyed. Liam looked down at her with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was pure contempt, unmixed with pity or doubt. You told me the facility cost $6,000, he said with a flat voice. You showed me fake brochures. You made me believe I was doing the right thing for my mother, when really you were sending her to hell to steal money from our accounts. He crouched down to be at her level. Tell me, Harper, how much of those gambling debts did you know I didn't know about? How much else have you been lying to me? She didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was written on her face. Arthur intervened again. According to our investigations, Mr. Duran, your wife has been using credit cards in your name without authorization for a total of $120,000. The gambling debts are just a part. There are also designer purchases, jewelry, spa treatments, all charged to credit lines that are about to go into collections. Liam straightened up slowly, like a man who had just received a mortal blow but remained standing by sheer force of will. $120,000. He repeated mechanically. My whole life I have worked to build a stable future. I saved every penny, and you destroyed it all without me even knowing. He turned to me with fresh tears. Mom, I am so sorry. I should have listened to you when you told me Harper only cared about money. I should have really seen you instead of the image she painted of you. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think I was finally seeing the truth. But his words sounded rehearsed, calculated. He was still thinking about those $10 million. He was still acting for the audience, trying to win my sympathy to secure his inheritance. Arthur, I said, ignoring Liam, how fast can we proceed with the eviction? Harper snapped her head up. Eviction? What are you talking about? I smiled, and this time the smile had teeth. This house, whose do you think it really is? I saw comprehension hit her like a cold wave. Arthur opened another folder. The house was purchased 3 years ago with a bank loan in Mr. Liam Duran's name. However, the down payment of $200,000 came from a source he was unaware of. His father, Mr. Duran, requested a personal loan using his pension plan as collateral. That loan was granted by a bank that happens to be owned by the Sterling family. Arthur looked at me. Your father, Richard, arranged everything quietly to help his grandson without anyone knowing. Liam was white as snow. So, grandfather, he paid for this house. Arthur nodded. Technically, the personal loan is still active. You owe $180,000 payable to Sterling Investments Bank. And given that bank is now owned by Mrs. Eleanor as part of her inheritance, he left the sentence unfinished. I can call the loan whenever I want. I finished for him. I can demand immediate full payment. And when you cannot pay, I can execute the collateral and take possession of the house. Harper finally understood the magnitude of her situation. Not only was she going to lose her husband, not only would she face criminal charges, she would also lose the house, the lifestyle, everything she had built on lies and manipulation. She collapsed completely, sobbing in a way that would have been pathetic if it hadn't been so deserved. "You have 24 hours, I announced firmly. 24 hours to get your personal belongings out of this house. After that, locksmiths will change every key, and anything left inside will be considered abandoned." I looked at Harper directly. "And just to be clear, personal belongings means clothes and toiletries. No furniture, no electronics, nothing that was bought with Liam's money or with fraudulent credit cards." Madison found courage from some desperate place. "You cannot do this. It is illegal. You need a court order to evict someone." She was screaming now, face red with rage and impotence. Arthur simply pulled out more papers. "I already have the necessary court orders. Judge Morales, an old friend of Mr. Sterling, signed them this afternoon after reviewing all the evidence. Everything is perfectly legal, Miss Madison." I turned to the guests who still remained frozen in the foyer. "You may leave. This family has matters to resolve in private." They didn't need to be told twice. They moved toward the door with barely disguised haste, murmuring awkward goodbyes. The woman with mahogany hair paused briefly next to me. "I am sorry for having been part of this, even as a spectator," she whispered. "You didn't deserve any of what happened here." And then they were gone, leaving us alone. Me, Liam, Harper, Madison, and Arthur. The silence was dense, heavy as lead. Finally, Liam spoke. "Mom, what do I have to do?" His voice sounded broken, empty. "Tell me exactly what you need me to do for you to forgive me, to give me a chance with grandfather's inheritance." There it was again, the inheritance. He didn't ask how he could repair our bond. He didn't ask how to regain my love, my respect. He asked about the money. "You know what is the saddest part, Liam?" I said, walking slowly toward the door. "Even now, after everything you have seen and heard, you still think in terms of transactions. What do you have to do to get what? As if love were something that can be bought or earned by checking off a list of requirements." I stopped in front of him. "Your grandfather Richard put those conditions in the will not because he wanted to make you jump through hoops. He did it because he hoped the process of fulfilling them would actually transform you, that it would teach you what I could never teach you." I pulled my phone from my pant pocket. It was old, with a scratched screen, but it worked. I dialed a saved number. Someone answered after the second ring. "Mrs. Eleanor," a female voice said on the other end. "Yes, it is me. Could you send the car now? I'm finished here." There was a confirmation, and I hung up. Liam looked at me with confusion. "What car?" As if answering his question, headlights illuminated the window. A black car, long and elegant, pulled up in front of the house. It was a Mercedes S-Class, the type of vehicle one sees in movies about millionaires. A uniformed chauffeur got out and opened the rear door, waiting. "That car?" I replied simply. "My father left several vehicles. This is one of the more modest ones." I saw Liam's eyes widen, seeing the car. Harper also watched from the floor, mouth open. Even Arthur smiled slightly at the perfection of the moment. I walked toward the door, but stopped before leaving. "Liam, if you really want that chance, if you genuinely believe you can fulfill the conditions of the will, then present yourself at Arthur's offices tomorrow at 9 in the morning. He will have all the divorce papers ready for you to sign. He will also have a contract where you voluntarily renounce this house and all shared properties with Harper." I paused. "And we will assign you a small apartment, similar to the one I lived in. That is where you will begin your 2-year process." His eyes shone with desperate hope. "I will be there. At 9 sharp. I promise, Mom." I nodded without smiling. "We will see." I turned to Harper and Madison one last time. "And you two, expect a visit from the police tomorrow morning. Arthur already filed all formal charges: fraud, conspiracy, document forgery, financial abuse of an elderly person. You are probably looking at between 5 and 10 years in prison each." Madison began to cry again, but these tears didn't move me. "My children. It's me, Saba. What is going to happen to my children?" I looked at her coldly. "Your husband will have to take care of them. Or maybe your mother. It is not my problem, Madison. You should have thought of them before." I walked up to her until I was very close. "And I want you to understand something. I am not doing this for revenge. I am doing this for justice. Because if I hadn't turned out to be the heir to a fortune, you would have gone ahead with your plan. You would have locked me in that horrible home. You would have stolen the little I had. You would have taken my dignity, my freedom, probably my life. My voice hardened even more. So no, I do not care about your children right now. I care that people like you learn you cannot destroy lives without consequences. I care that the next vulnerable old woman you meet on your path is safe because you will be behind bars. I walked out of the house without looking back. The fresh night air hit my face, and I breathed deeply for the first time in hours. The chauffeur greeted me with a respectful bow. "Mrs. Sterling," he said. It was the first time anyone had called me that. My father's last name, the name I had rejected for 30 years out of pride. "Just Eleanor is fine," I replied softly. He helped me into the car and closed the door. The interior smelled of new leather and polished wood. The seats were incredibly comfortable. There was a small fridge with water and champagne. A screen showed trip information. Everything was so different from the dirty, crowded buses I had taken for years. Arthur got into the front seat next to the driver. "Where shall I take you, Mrs. Eleanor?" the driver asked. I was about to give the address of my old apartment, but then I stopped. I didn't live there anymore. That place, that life, was over. "To the Grand Imperial Hotel," I said. It was the most luxurious hotel in the city. I had never been there, hadn't even passed through the doors. "A suite, please." As the car pulled away from Liam's house, I looked out the rear window. I saw my son standing in the doorway, watching me leave. Harper was at his side, still crying. Madison had disappeared, probably running to call a lawyer. The house my father had secretly bought, the house where I had endured so many humiliations, grew smaller in the distance. "How does it feel?" Arthur asked, turning from the front seat. I thought about his question carefully. How did I feel? It wasn't triumph exactly. It wasn't happiness either. It was something more complex, deeper. "I feel free," I replied finally. "For the first time in 65 years, I feel completely free." Arthur nodded with understanding. "Your father would be proud. He left very specific instructions on how to handle this situation if something like this occurred. He told me, 'Arthur, my daughter is strong, but she has forgotten her own strength. If I ever see her being trampled, give her the tools to get up, but do not do it for her. She must choose to stand up on her own.'" His eyes shone with contained emotion. "You chose to stand up tonight, Mrs. Eleanor. You chose your dignity over false family peace." Tears began to roll down my cheeks again. But these were different. They were tears of relief, of liberation, of mourning for all the years lost with my father. "He really watched me all this time?" I asked with a trembling voice. "All these years without speaking, he knew everything that was happening?" Arthur pulled a letter from his briefcase. "He wanted you to read this after everything. It is a letter he wrote for you 2 weeks before he died." He handed me the envelope. It was thick, expensive paper, with my name written in the shaky handwriting of an old man. "Eleanor, my stubborn and beautiful girl," it said on the front. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letter had 3 handwritten pages. I began to read, and the tears flowed harder. "My dear Eleanor," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I have finally died and that Arthur has kept his promise to give you everything that belongs to you. It also means you have probably gone through a difficult time because I gave him instructions to intervene only if he saw you were being treated with cruelty. Knowing you, I know you resisted a lot before accepting help. You were always like that, since you were a child, stubborn like your old father." I had to stop to wipe my tears. The chauffeur discreetly passed me a box of tissues without saying a word. I continued reading. "I know you never forgave me for how I reacted when your husband Robert died. You are right to be angry. I was a proud fool who wanted to control your life at the moment you most needed support, not orders. When I told you to come back home with me, to let me raise Liam with all the privileges money can buy, I didn't do it out of selfishness. I did it because I was terrified of losing you like I had lost your mother. Because the idea of watching you suffer, of watching you struggle in poverty, broke my heart." My hand shook, holding the paper. I remembered that fight as if it were yesterday. My father standing in the doorway of my tiny apartment, demanding I pack my things and return with him. Me, with 5-year-old Liam clinging to my leg, telling him I preferred to starve than raise my son, surrounded by the coldness of his mansion. But you told me no, the letter continued. You told me you wanted Liam to know the value of work, of earning things, of not being a spoiled rich kid like the sons of my business partners. You said you preferred he grow up poor but with character than rich and empty. And I, in my infinite arrogance, told you that you were making the worst mistake of your life, that you would regret it, that you would call me begging when you realized raising a child alone was impossible. I closed my eyes, remembering those hurtful words. I had carried them with me for 30 years, like invisible scars. I waited for your call for months, Eleanor, for years. But it never came. Instead, I hired investigators to watch you from afar. The reports I received destroyed me and filled me with pride simultaneously. I watched you work 3 jobs. I watched you sell the jewelry your mother had left you. I watched you choose not to eat so Liam could have a hot meal. I watched you cry alone at night when you thought no one saw you. And every report was a stab to my stupid, proud heart. The car stopped at a traffic light. Through the window, I saw a young mother walking with her small son. The scene reminded me of myself so many years ago. I kept reading. I wanted to intervene 1,000 times. I wanted to transfer money secretly, pay your rent without you knowing, leave bags of food at your door. But I knew if I did, if you discovered I was interfering, you would hate me even more. So I did the only thing I could do without betraying your trust. I made sure you never lacked work. Every store where you got a job, every place that hired you, received a discreet call from my contacts. I didn't ask them to give you special treatment, just to give you a fair chance. My breath caught. All those years thinking I was managing alone, and my father had been pulling invisible strings behind the scenes. I didn't know whether to feel grateful or furious. I watched Liam grow from a distance. I saw his graduations through photographs my investigators took. I saw how he became a bright and capable man thanks to your sacrifice. And I admit I had hopes he would value you, that he would recognize everything you had done for him. But those hopes began to fade when he met Harper. The name made me grit my teeth. I kept reading. From the first moment, my investigators reported worrying things about that woman. Her family had debts. She lived beyond her means, and there was a pattern of manipulative behavior. I asked Arthur to investigate thoroughly. What he found was worse than I imagined. Harper had had 3 previous relationships with wealthy men, and all had ended with accusations of theft or fraud that were silenced with payoffs. I looked up from the paper. Liam knew this. Arthur shook his head from the front seat. Your father wanted to tell him, but you never told him about Harper. By the time we found out about the relationship, they were already engaged. Your father decided not to interfere directly because he feared it would drive you away too. I returned to the letter with a heavy heart. I watched how Harper treated you, Eleanor. Every report I received about the humiliations you endured infuriated me more. I wanted to storm into that house 1,000 times and put that woman in her place, but you never asked for help. You never called me, and I respected your silence, even though it killed me to do so. Then, 6 months ago, I received my diagnosis: terminal cancer. The doctors gave me between 3 and 6 months to live. Tears were falling on the paper now, smudging the ink. My father had died of cancer, and I never knew. I never had the chance to say goodbye. I decided I couldn't die leaving you unprotected, especially when the reports began to mention Harper and Madison's plans to commit you to a nursing home. So I changed my will and gave very specific instructions to Arthur. He was to wait until the situation reached a critical point, until you finally felt forced to defend yourself. Because, my dear daughter, I didn't want you to believe I rescued you. I wanted you to rescue yourself. I had to stop reading to control my sobs. The chauffeur drove in respectful silence while I fell apart in the back seat. Everything I have is yours now. $135 million. Properties, companies, investments. It is much more than you will need in several lifetimes. But more important than the money are the tools I leave you, the contacts, the resources, the power to never be trampled by anyone again. Use it wisely, daughter. Use it to live the life you deserve, and that I denied you with my stupid pride. The letter continued on the last page. Regarding Liam, I left those conditions in the will because I still have hope he can change. That the good boy you raised still exists somewhere beneath the greed Harper cultivated in him. But if after 2 years you see he hasn't really changed, if his repentance is just an act to get the money, then cut him off without remorse. Some people never learn, and it is not your responsibility to save them eternally. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of those words. My father, even in death, was giving me permission to let go of my son if necessary. Finally, I want to ask for your forgiveness. Forgiveness for not being there when you needed me. Forgiveness for letting pride destroy our relationship. Forgiveness for all the years we lost together. If I could turn back time, I would hug you that day instead of giving you orders. I would tell you I respected your decision and would be there to support you in any way you needed. But I cannot change the past. I can only try to fix the future awaiting you. The last lines were written with even shakier handwriting, as if it had taken much effort to finish. Live, Eleanor. Live the life you sacrificed for Liam. Travel, see the world, buy that house by the sea you dreamed of as a child. Fall in love again if you find someone who deserves you. Eat in expensive restaurants. Buy new clothes. Learn to paint like you always wanted. Do everything you put off for 65 years. And when you do, smile and think of your foolish old father who finally did something right. I love you, my girl. I always loved you, even when I didn't know how to show it. Your father, Richard. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. They weren't exactly sad tears, but everything mixed together. Grief for the lost years, relief at finally being seen, gratitude for the gift he had left me, and deep love for an imperfect father who had done the best he could with the emotional tools he had. The car stopped in front of the Grand Imperial Hotel. It was a majestic 15-story building with a marble and glass facade. Uniformed doormen flanked the entrance. A massive fountain decorated the front, illuminated with colored lights. I had been passing this hotel for years on the bus, admiring it from afar, never imagining that one day I would enter. Arthur got out first and opened my door. He offered his hand to help me down. My legs were shaking after the emotional journey of the letter. "Are you okay, Mrs. Eleanor?" he asked, with genuine concern. I nodded, wiping the last tears away. "I will be fine. I need to process all this." We entered the hotel lobby, and it was like entering another world. The floor was Italian marble with gold veins. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling 3 stories up. There was artwork on the walls that probably cost more than everything I had earned in my life. Elegant people walked everywhere with designer luggage and clothes that screamed wealth. And there I was, with my second-hand beige blouse and my worn shoes. But when I approached the front desk, something had changed. The receptionist, a young woman with an impeccable uniform, looked at me, and her expression wasn't one of disdain. She looked at Arthur, who nodded slightly, and her smile widened. "Mrs. Sterling," she said with a warm voice, "it is an honor to have you with us. Your presidential suite is ready. Will you need anything special tonight?" Presidential suite. The word sounded unreal. "No, thank you," I managed to say. "I just need to rest." She handed me a key card in a leather envelope. "The bellman will accompany you to your room. If you need anything at all, simply dial 0 from the suite phone. We have room service 24 hours. The bellman, a middle-aged man in a dark green uniform, appeared at my side. "This way, ma'am." I followed him to the elevators, with Arthur walking beside me. The elevator doors were polished bronze, where I could see my distorted reflection. We stopped on the 15th floor, the top one. The presidential suite occupied the entire floor. When they opened the doors, I gasped. It wasn't a room. It was a palace. The living room was larger than my entire old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the illuminated city stretching to the horizon. There were cream-colored leather sofas, a dining table for 12, a full kitchen, a bar stocked with expensive liquors. Open doors revealed 3 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom. "This will be your temporary home while you decide what to do permanently," Arthur explained. "Your father kept this suite reserved year-round. Sometimes he used it for business meetings, other times just to escape. Now it is yours." He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. "Here are credit cards in your name, checks, and cash in case you need anything immediate. There is also a list of properties you inherited. You can visit them whenever you like and decide if you want to keep any or sell them all. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were black credit cards, a checkbook with my name printed in gold letters, and a stack of bills I didn't dare count. "Arthur," I said with a broken voice, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be rich. I don't know how to manage companies or investments. I don't know anything about this world." He smiled gently. "You don't have to know it all now. You have a full team of advisors, accountants, and managers who handled your father's business and will now work for you. My job is to help you understand everything gradually. You are not alone, Mrs. Eleanor. Your father made sure of that." He walked to the window and pointed outside. "Look at that city. For 65 years you traversed it as an invisible person, trampled, ignored. But now you have the power to change everything, not just for yourself, but for other people like you." I approached the window and looked down. I could see the streets where I had walked for years, the buses I had taken, the buildings where I had worked. Everything looked so different from above. "What do I do now?" I asked quietly. "How do I start?" "Start by sleeping," Arthur replied wisely. "It has been a long and emotionally exhausting night. Tomorrow will come with new perspectives. At 11 in the morning, I have scheduled a meeting with the financial advisory team to review your portfolio. And at 9, if Liam shows up as promised, I will handle that for you. You don't have to see him if you don't want to." I nodded gratefully. The idea of facing my son again so soon filled me with exhaustion. "Thank you, Arthur, for everything. For taking care of my father. For taking care of me now." He bowed slightly. "It is my honor, Mrs. Eleanor. Rest well." And with that, he left, leaving me alone in that massive suite. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, simply looking around. Everything was so surreal. 12 hours ago, I was in my small apartment, ironing my beige blouse, preparing for another night of humiliations. And now I was here, in a suite that probably cost $5,000 a night, heir to a fortune I couldn't even fully comprehend. I walked into one of the bedrooms. The bed was huge, with sheets that felt like clouds under my fingers. There was a walk-in closet filled with white bathrobes and new slippers. The bathroom had a marble tub big enough for 2 people, overlooking the city. I looked at myself in the giant mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. My eyes were red from crying so much. My gray hair was messy. My beige blouse had a spot where I had spilled water during dinner. But there was something different in my expression. I didn't see defeat there anymore. I didn't see shame. I saw a woman who had survived, who had resisted, and who had finally said enough. I filled the tub with hot water and found expensive bath salts in a cabinet. I submerged myself in the water and let the heat relax muscles I didn't know were so tense. I closed my eyes and thought of my father, of all those years we spent apart due to pride and misunderstandings, of how he had been watching over me from the shadows, respecting my independence but ensuring I never fell too far. I thought of Liam, of the sweet boy he had been and the weak man he had become. I wondered if he could really change, if 2 years of living humbly would be enough to transform him, or if, as my father had warned, some people simply never learn. I got out of the tub an hour later, wrapped in one of those soft white robes. Room service had left a tray with fruit, cheese, and a bottle of champagne while I was in the bath. There was a note, courtesy of management. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sterling." I sat on the private balcony of the suite, with a glass of champagne in hand, and looked at the stars. The city glowed below like a sea of lights, and for the first time in my life, I felt that I shone too. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." Liam's voice sounded wrecked on the other side. "Mom, it's me. Please, don't hang up." I was about to do it, but something stopped me. "What do you want, Liam?" "I need you to know I signed the divorce papers tonight. I called a lawyer and signed them. Harper is out of the house. I told her I never want to see her again." His voice broke, and I called the bank to start the process of transferring the house to your name. "I don't want any of this if it means losing you." I stayed silent, waiting. I knew there was more. "I know you think I am only doing this for grandfather's money," he continued. "And maybe you are right. Maybe at first I was only thinking about that. But after you left, I stayed alone in that house, surrounded by all these things Harper bought with stolen money. And I realized something." He paused for a long time. "I realized I have been living a lie, a life built on appearances and greed. And you, Mom, you who lived in that small apartment, who worked folding clothes, you were richer than me in all the ways that matter." Tears began to roll down my cheeks again. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Liam said. "I don't expect you to give me grandfather's money. I only hope that someday, maybe years in the future, you can look at me and see something other than disappointment." He breathed deep. "I will be at Arthur's office tomorrow at 9. And after that, I will move into that small apartment you mentioned, and I will work at whatever is necessary. Not for the money, but because I need to prove to myself that I can be the man you deserve as a son." He hung up before I could answer. I stared at the phone for a long time. Were they genuine words, or just another manipulation? I didn't know. Only time would tell.